Breedinum Radio, brought to you by Pertnear Outdoors, your source for all things deer hunting and the rut here in New York State, right in your backyard, so you can get up in the stand and pound them all season long.
Welcome, everybody. Yeah. Begin. Welcome, everybody, to week 5, part 2 of Breedinum Radio. And this is a big Willy and little Willy experience for you all. So the two of us are going to break down our successful hunts from last weekend. Both Dad and I both shot bucks down in the Naples area, and wanted to share those stories with everybody. So you heard Jimmy's story last Monday. This past Monday, I guess, the second, we posted Jimmy's story with John Teeter. And that was the first time, I think, ever that the three of us all shot bucks in the same week. I was thinking back to it. Yeah, whether it be bow or gun, I think that's the first time it's ever happened. So it was a cool experience.
Yeah,
I was
Jim
pumped.
was on. Jim was on with I can't remember his first name. D'Agostino, the guy named from PA.
Jim. It's a tough name to remember. Yeah.
What's his first name?
Jim. You ever heard
okay.
anybody named Jim? Yeah.
I'll remember that now.
Mm-hmm.
But he was talking about the fact when he, I don't know if he killed last weekend, maybe.
He killed last Saturday.
Yeah, and his dad did the same day too. So he was talking about, just how special that was that, he got a buck and he couldn't get hold of his dad. And it was because his dad was out of cell range and he had a buck down too. So he just was. And then Jimmy told a story about, I don't know, I think it was 5-6 years ago. We, both him and I think it was actually the anniversary date of, I think it was when you had your buck down. It was either Thursday or Friday of last week was the anniversary. Maybe it was 5 years from when he and I both doubled up. I got a nice 8 and he got a nice 9.
Yeah. So
yeah, that was a great weekend. It was cool.
Yeah, we're starting to, it helps with all the Facebook memories and the Instagram memories. You start to see the trend of when you have your success, and it's pretty consistent, at least in that area where we're hunting. That Halloween weekend, end of October is the weekend to be in the woods.
Yeah, there's something about that Halloween weekend. We have a lot of success really from the 28th through the 31st of, we just do really well the last few days of October.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were all had high expectations heading into last weekend. So I don't know do you want me to tell my story first, since I shot mine first, and then you can.
Yeah. Why don't you? I think you had Friday off, right? So you kind of got to jump on the weekend and took Connor, one of the was it last year that you took him out and he got his first deer, or the year before?
2 years ago. Yep. In 2018. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was awesome that you guys got to go together and hunt some public forest there. And
yep.
Yeah, so tell us about your day.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot that goes into this story. I mean, it was awesome that I ended up putting that deer on the ground, but that was really just the icing on the cake. This piece of property, I've been spending over the last 3 years a ton of time up there, both during, really actually more off-season time up there than I have during season. I think I've only probably put maybe 5 hunts in there, 5 days, whether it be a full day or just a morning hunt or an evening hunt. So I probably put more than that, probably six different sits, 7 sits.
I think you've taken 3 deer out of there now, though, haven't you?
I've taken 4 deer out of there.
Oh, okay.
Three does and a buck now. And so my percentages are pretty good. When I go in there, I have, I've got opportunity. So it's, that's a big piece of it. I've put a ton of time by myself really into this area, and I haven't, I think that's a factor. And I've heard a bunch of discussions recently on podcasts, and then I think even Jimmy and Jim talked about it on the episode today. Was, we all kind of get into this rhythm of, if you have a piece of property that you hunt religiously, you almost get into a routine of like overthinking everything. And so this spot here, I've certainly been spending a lot of time scouting and hiking it, but I just knew when I wanted to go there, and it got to be approaching the end of the month, and I knew I had Friday off, and it was a day that I had no distraction. I didn't have to be home at a certain time. that's a thing too that's new in my life, because you know, pre-kids, it was, wide open. If you had to hunt, you just went and hunted. And now that, you got the two little ones running around, there's always something grabbing at your time. So, I knew Friday was a day that, I was confident. I had confidence in my plan. I had confidence in the weather, and, had a few conversations with people, through social media and over the phone, leading up to it, just picking people's brains. And, I had I had a conversation with Brad Semino, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And him and I were messaging. He was real supportive, and he's like, just do something different. It was just real basic what he said. He's like, just do something different. And I was like, yeah, noted. I'm like, I'm just going to be super aggressive here. Like, I know where I want to go. I know where the sign is from the scouting I did in the off season. I'm like, I'm just going to go straight into the lion's den where I know the sign is.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to Steve Shirk too. He's been a great guy to be in touch with, and he's so engaged with what's going on in the woods, and he's very responsive. So I shoot him a message, and we're messaging back and forth. He shot a nice buck a week ago, and so I was just messaging with him, and he's like, from what he's seeing in the mountains down there, he's like, there's already bucks locking down on does. And we were kind of seeing a little bit of that, based on what we were seeing on cameras and what we were experiencing on hunts, where it was like, there's just nothing going on. Like, this is supposed to be seeking time, and you were just not seeing any of that. So, Steve said, he's like, just know where your resident does are and just watch them and pay close attention to where they are and what they're doing. So it's like, that was another factor that was in my mind, where I knew where there was definitely a concentration of does that were living on this property, and I was just going to go in there. So we get to Friday. The plan was to, help Sarah get off to work with the kids to daycare, and I would just get out of here when I could. So by the time I got there, I met up with Connor. It was like 9:30, 9:45. So we started up in the woods, and it couldn't have been a better morning to like hunt your way in, because it was dark. It was cold, but it wasn't too cold. So everything was kind of wet because we'd had some rain, quite a bit of rain last week. So everything was perfect for sneaking in. And the way that the wind was blowing out of the north, and then we were walking up the edge of a ravine. So you kind of had some natural thermals getting pulled down into the ravine, but then you had the wind blowing across our face, and we were at the southern end of the property. So anything that was blowing across, we didn't really care, because it was off of the property we could hunt. So we worked our way up in, and it's fun. It's been a lot of fun. This is only my second time hunting with Connor, but him and I were best friends, really good friends. I call everybody my best friend. We were very good friends in high school growing up, and we went to college together. We were roommates freshman year and sophomore year at Fredonia. So we're good friends, and it's been a lot of fun. It's only my second time hunting with him, but apparently we're good luck charms for each other, because we're 2 for 2. Right. But so we're just walking up in there, and I'm pointing stuff out to him, and here I am with probably $1,000 worth of gear on, and Connor's got a little like mountaineering, like super lightweight backpack, and he's carrying like a big steel climber that weighs 30 pounds, and here I am, just a walking, Cabela's, and Connor's packing up in there, and he's just excited about the unknown of what he's going to get into, So we get up to just about the level where I've got not my cell cam, my other cam, where I was getting all those daytime pictures, and that's where I wanted to set Connor up. Yeah. And it's right on. There's a layer of brush that runs up and down the hill, east and west, and the hills run north and south, so you can kind of visualize going up the hill. It's a pretty good patch of brush. It's all like rose bushes and
it's really thick.
It's thick, and that's where all the deer seem to congregate and travel through. So I knew I kind of wanted to have Connor right on the outside of that. And the theory with this hunt was that we'd be on the downwind side with a north wind of that bedding area. Right. And there should, in theory, be bucks moving up and down the hill, scent checking that bedding area. So we get literally right to where I wanted to put Connor. We're standing like 50 yards outside the brush, and it's dead quiet. It's just super quiet walking. And all of a sudden you just like see an explosion in the brush, and up comes this deer. And it was a little spike, and he was chasing a doe. I don't know whether the doe saw us and she took off running and the buck didn't know what was going on and he just started chasing her. But,
Yeah.
like my eyes light up. I'm like, oh, it's here. We're on the right spot. So I'm like, Connor, we got to set you up right here. And so we found a tree, got him going up it. My plan was to go to the next level. The hill kind of continues to bench on the way up. So I was going to go to the next level up on the same bedding area, just on the downwind side above it. And there's these little creek beds that kind of run up through the property. So I got over to one of those creek beds and I'm working up that. And it's nice because you can kind of stay like hidden in a way down in that creek bed. You can't see anything, but nothing can see you down in there.
That drainage, was that the one that's got the logging road running along the north side of it? And there's an old overgrown logging trail there.
There's a logging road that runs there's a great big drainage that comes up from the bottom.
Yeah.
And then that one kind of like fizzes out. It kind of like just opens up at the top. Yep. And then there's an old logging trail that runs north south.
Yep.
And then there's little creek beds that run north or up the hill east off of that. So I'm working my way up and just poking super quiet because I'm anticipating it's all oaks and you're right on the outside of this brush. And I'm anticipating I might get into something on my way up there. So sure enough, I get right to where this area this creek bed kind of starts to open up like the bigger one does. It starts to open up onto this knob. And I look up in front of me and there's a deer feeding. And then it like stops and it's rubbing its head on a tree. And I was in a mood where I was going to shoot. If I had an opportunity to doe, I was going to shoot a doe.
Yeah.
So this little buck's like rubbing his head on the tree so I wasn't going to obviously shoot him, but I snuck up. I wanted to see how close I could get to him because it was so quiet and he was so focused on what he was doing. So I got within like 20 yards of him.
Wow.
And I'm just sitting there watching him, and the wind switched. Every once in a while the wind would die down, and then you had the thermals that were pulling the wind up the hill. And this ended up biting me in the ass later on in the hunt. But so he ended up spooking. He smelled me and he was blowing, and I got pissed at him because I was afraid he was going to blow my hunt. And so I like made myself, like I spooked the deer away. I like made sure he saw me and I got him out of there because I didn't know what I was getting into, but I figured it was going to be good. So sure enough, he runs off, and then a little 6-pointer comes down the hill wanting to know what was going on down there. And at this time, I caught a whiff of something. I don't know whether it was estrus or if it was a rutting buck, but it smelled like estrus. And it kind of just hit me right in the face. And I was like, ooh, it's kind of like noted. I'm like, there's something here. Like, that's why everything's just kind of like that buck was a little spike was lingering around. And
yeah.
So the little 6-pointer comes down, and he was at 25 yards on the same, right where that little buck was, or the button buck was. And he got straight downwind of me, and he was broadside. And the thought crossed my mind. I'm like maybe. And I'm like, just relax, Bill. I'm like, it's a little tiny buck, right? Yeah. So he ends up just turning, didn't see anything. So he turned and went back up the hill. So I had a spot where I wanted to get to. So I just beelined for it as quick as I could quietly. And I'm shimmying up the tree. I get to the top of my third stick. And all of a sudden I hear just the whole hill break loose behind me. And I turn around and look, and there's just, I have no idea how many deer it was. It was 6 to 10 deer is my best guess. It was at least a 6 deer, and there was a couple does, and it was just bucks everywhere. There was multiple just small little spikers, but I did see a couple with good horn on them, and it just was like, and they all just came blowing down the hill towards me, got to like 50 yards, but they cut back into the brush, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, and there's a scrape right to my left, right between me and the brush. I'm about 50 yards outside the brush, and there's a scrape at 20 yards that I had marked back in August that was active. Like it was somewhat of a community scrape.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is money. I'm like, this is going to be great. So an hour and a half goes by and nothing's happening. And the thoughts crossing my mind. I'm like, all those deer came down from up there. The deer, that 6-point, he came down from above. I'm like, maybe I should get up there, and maybe that's where the action is. I'm just not in it. And so I start, of course, breaking things down. And I'll never make this mistake again. This is a little pro tip for people. Don't ever, ever, ever drop your bow to the ground and let the rope go. Keep that rope attached to whether it's your belt loop or your pack or saddle, whatever. Never let go of that, because I'm bows down on the ground, drop that, put my platform in my backpack, put my backpack on, and I'm climbing down the tree. And again, I'm at the top of my third step, starting that process. And I hear something, or I just, you kind of like glancing around as you're climbing.
Yeah.
And I look up to where all that action had been, and I see a deer standing there. And it's a doe. It's a good looking doe. And the sun's shining at this point. So she's like just shining, glistening in the sun. So she's looking behind her, and I'm like, oh no. I'm like, that's not good. So I take my binoculars and I look, and I figure he's probably a 3-year-old, just a gorgeous 8-point, big buck. And I mean, I'm like shitting my pants right now because this deer's at 100 yards and the doe's coming out. There's a little finger that kind of comes down to that creek bed, and she's feeding out that finger. And my mind's running a mile a minute. I'm like, what do I do? Do I get down? What's my move here? I have no weapon. So do I get down and then try to come back up, or do I get down and try to do something from the ground? So I'm like, well, I got to get down there. So I start climbing down, and I'm watching them as I'm doing it, trying to be quiet. I get to the ground, and at this point, I wear those Arctic Shield boot blankets. I call them boot blankets, but boot covers, because it was kind of chilly, and I had just my hiking boots on. And so I have one boot blanket on because I had dropped the other one, and I had one boot blanket on and just regular boots. I'm trying to climb down my climbing sticks, So I get to the ground, and I got ropes tied up, my backpack on. I'm like, freaking mess. I grab my bow. It's still got the rope on it from coming down the tree. I knock an arrow. I'm like, there's no going back up at this point. And I'm kneeling there next to this giant oak tree that this little tree I was in was next to. It doesn't that doe. She drops over into the creek bed, and this buck starts coming down the finger ridge to me. He's at like 60 yards.
Oh, wow.
And the wind is coming right across my face. Perfect, and then right on the button, he's just marching down that finger, and the wind stops, and the same thing, the thermals take the wind up the hill, and he just acted like he got hit right in the face with my scent, and he just stood there and just stared at me, and I'm like, no.
How far was he then?
He was 60 yards.
Yeah.
And he just didn't snort, didn't flag, nothing, just turned and just walked right back the same track he came, right back into the brush. And I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, well, I better just go up and get my stuff, and let's get out of here, and we'll get up there. Like I've already spooked something. I'm like, let's just get this move on, and we'll get up there for the evening hunt. So I break all my stuff down. I get up up that creek bed, the next one over that takes me up to that next level. So I snuck up there, and I pop out. I'm right on the level, and I'm trying to find it's a flat bench with like some goldenrod and rose bushes that kind of come out from the brush from the bedding area. So it's like a nice little like thick undergrowth inside the open hardwoods there on that little bench. And
yeah, that's a nice spot. I think I know where that shelf is.
Yeah. You and I walked there in the winter that one time.
Yeah.
So I finally find a tree, and I decided to push in a little bit closer to the brush. I was like, at this point, I'm like, I know the deer are moving near that brush. I'm like, at this rate, just be aggressive. Just get right in there. What do you have to lose? You may not hunt this again during archery. So I got a tree that was like 20 yards outside the brush, and there's an old overgrown road right in front of me that runs up and down the hill that the deer seem to like to use quite a bit.
I know that road.
So I get up to the third stick again. Shit you not. I'm third stick. And I look, and I'm doing my scanning, just climbing, and I look in front of me, and here's 2 bucks just standing there in the rose bushes just feeding. And I'm like, where the hell did you come from? Like I think they must have been bedded right there on the outside of the brush, and they just stood up, and it was like 3:00 and they were just starting to feed, And one of the bucks, I'm pretty confident thinking back, and what that deer looked like, I'm pretty sure it's the buck I shot. And the both of them, the spike horn, he came feeding towards me. I let him go past. I was hanging from my lineman's belt I'd pulled my bow up at that point because my bow was still on the ground. And I was hanging from my lineman's belt, standing on my top stick with an arrow knocked. I'm like, it might happen, and I'm not even set up yet, And so I get the buck feeds by. The buck I ended up shooting, he went back into the brush, and I just settled in, got everything all set up, and it was about 4:45, and I hadn't really seen much. I had a doe that was hanging around behind me, just kind of oddly lingering, and she was downwind like the whole time.
Wow.
So in hindsight, I think that was probably, it looked like a small doe. So I'm thinking that was probably the yearling doe that was with the doe that was being pushed around.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's what was going on, because she just all night long, she lingered there. Once I got up in the tree, she was just there. You know, it's kind of odd. So I hit it's 4:45. I hit the grunt call a couple times. I know Jimmy had success, and I've heard some other guys over the last few weeks that have had success just blind calling. So I hit the grunt call a couple times, and just a little calling sequence, and about 10 minutes went by, and I'm looking north into that brush, and I just hear something snap. And I'm paying attention out there, but it caught my attention right straight in front of me, and I just see the buck coming, and he's just on a deer trail, just heading right out, and he was working his horns in some of the brush as he was walking through. And as soon as he came outside the brush, it was just like he was on a mission. He never stopped. And he comes walking, and he jumps across that old road. He jumps down into the old road's kind of sunk down. He jumps across the old road. And at this rate, I know he's coming. I'm going to get a shot. So I'm trying to figure out, I have an adjustable sight. I'm trying to figure out, where is he going to be? You know, is he going to be at 20? Is he going to be under than 20? If it's 20 or under, I just use my 20. I have a spot hog, so it goes from 20 is the shortest distance. I can go all the way up to, 70, 80. But so I'm like adjusting my knob, trying to figure out where he's going to be. And finally he decides he's going to he hits like 20 yards, and then he turns and starts like quartering away from me, almost heading down the hill. And at that rate, I'm like, I can't keep dicking with this. I got to pick a range and just aim in the middle of them and hope to God that I've got the right distance,
Yeah.
It's all, this probably all happened in a matter of 10 seconds
Yeah,
between me seeing him and me getting the shot. And he comes out. So I put it to 30 yards. I draw back, and he steps into this opening, and he's quartered away. Well, he's slightly quartering away. I put it right behind the shoulder, aimed a little bit high, and I shoot. And my first instinct when I see the arrow flying is that it's high. And all of a sudden I hear just this distinct, like a balloon popping. And I've never experienced that, but I've heard people talk about it. And that being like a, popping the diaphragm or hitting both lungs, just taking the air right out of them. But it was just the most distinct noise. And my first instinct was I hit a tree or something. The way the deer reacted, he didn't act like he was hit. And I've had this with almost every deer I've shot with this arrow setup I have. Almost every single one of the deer has been like this. They just have no clue what hit them. So I'm like, that's all going. I'm like processing all this, and I knock another arrow because I'm thinking I might be able to get another shot because he didn't really go anywhere. And he's just standing there facing away from me. So I grab my grunt call. I'm like, maybe he just doesn't know what's going on. He's all horned up. He doesn't know. So I hit the grunt call a couple of times, and I snort wheeze, and he didn't respond to any of it. So then I pull my binoculars up, and I'm watching him. I'm like, is he like, what the hell's going on? I don't see any blood. I'm just looking at the side I shot at, because he's kind of still quartering away from me a little. I'm seeing nothing. And then I'm watching his body language, and he starts to swaying, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I hit him. And now I'm excited, because I'm like, I thought I missed you, and I was pissed because I've had just issues missing decent good bucks with my bow. I'm not a great ratio over the last 10 years. So I'm like, now I'm excited, and I'm watching him, and he's starting to go down, and I hear something to my left. I look to my left, and here comes this beautiful, he's an 8-pointer, but he's got he wanted to grow a G3 on his right side.
Yeah.
And he's coming marching with a purpose. And I
probably
think
from that grunting and snort wheeze.
He's seen the other buck for sure. He was downwind of him. Yeah. And then he heard me call. So he had his hair bristled up, and he got up. He approached the buck that I shot. He was approaching him, and I've got video of it. It's crappy video on my cell phone, but I got a little video of it. It's pretty cool. He's walking up to that buck, and he's got the hair all bristled up, and his body's all stiff, and he's walking sideways with his ears.
I was gonna say, did he have that little sideways walk?
Yeah, sideways walking. He must have been standing right over the top of my deer. He was within 5 yards of my deer as my deer was laying down, passing. And all of a sudden I see the white belly come up on mine, and that buck's like, holy shit. He's like, what the hell happened there? He freaks out, and he took like 20 bounds, and he just kind of stood there, and then he walked back off to the south, and it took another couple minutes, and my buck ended up passing. But what ended up happening, the best of what I can figure, is that my arrow was going high, and it deflected and ended up hitting him right across his windpipe and it could not have squared up his windpipe any better. It was unbelievable how it center punched it in and out. And he bled out, and he was done in a minute and a half.
Yeah. You must
obviously not, I must've hit the artery there. Obviously. Yeah. Obviously not the shot I was looking for. I'm not proud of it. But it was incredibly lucky, and really probably the most ethical, non-planned shot you could have because of how quickly he bled out.
Yeah.
But not an ounce of meat wasted. When I butchered him, it was just the cleanest butcher job ever. Aside from a headshot, it was, I just lost a little bit of neck meat down there in the bottom. But I was freaking tickled pink. And, I texted everybody, and I text Connor, buck down, and he was fired up. He hasn't really experienced a lot of this before. And so it was exciting to get him to come down there, and he worked his way around above me, and I ended up seeing another shooter buck came through probably 10 minutes before dark.
Wow.
He came through from the north, headed south, it was interesting. A lot of the deer were coming out of the brush heading south, which to me, I would have expected them if they were going to be working into the wind, but they were all working south with the wind at their back coming out of the bedding area, which is,
I think they were going into that. It's not really a flat because there's nothing flat up there, but it's a bit of a flat. There's like an oak. That whole area is nice, big, mature oaks as you head south from there. And I wonder if they were headed in there to feed.
I'm sure they had to have been going to feed. It was awesome. Dragged him out of there. And I got to stop doing that because that's like I said, my fourth deer I've shot up there. And every time I go up, I'm prepared to quarter them. And I just never do it. And
That's a long drag.
It's a long drag, and it's just totally unnecessary. So then we're going to go back up there on opening day of rifle. And if we shoot anything, we're quartering it out because
it's downhill. You say, well, it's downhill all the way. That's a tough go.
Well, it's downhill.
That's a long ways.
And then the way that we're butchering this year, like our group's kind of broken up a little bit. We haven't gotten together to cut yet out here. We got a new, the guys Kirsch's sold the farm, so we don't have our shop to butcher in anymore. And we haven't really, we've had like one deer every other week to cut. So, we've just been doing them on our own. Like I've done both of my deer on my own here on the granite countertop in the kitchen, and AJ's did his on his own, and Brad did his on his own when he got his. So we're just kind of working through it, but it'd be so much easier if I just had them quartered and I just bring them home and have the quarters hanging in the garage.
Yep.
If the temperature is appropriate, and just let them hang. And if I want to do a quarter a night or something, you just pick away at it instead of, I skunned my deer out Monday night. So that was done. And then, picked away at it Tuesday as I was wasting my time watching the election results. There was no need for me to stay up till 2 a.m. apparently, but so that was my entire process, shot to finish. It was a memorable hunt, and I'm very proud. It's not the biggest buck, but I'm very proud of that buck because the plan came together and I was more aggressive than I normally am. And I attribute my success from that hunt to that, to my being aggressive.
And you got the deer because of all the time you spend up there. You spend less time, as you said, hunting up there than you do scouting. And, you didn't have a stand in there. You packed one in and you adjusted and set up. But, all those trips that you've had up there have really given you a great foundation, understanding how those deer move on that property. And gosh, it's just that there's so many deer in there. It's just it's a great population of deer in there. It's beautiful country.
Yeah.
And, it's so much more than the antler size, when you go up in there with a buddy for the day and, it was just it just felt like a deer hunting day that day, you know, and it just it's great that you get up there and come out with a deer, you know, mission accomplished, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so what? It wasn't a big monster. It doesn't matter. There's just great memories and
Yep.
a little table fare in the freezer, and
That's right.
all good.
Yep. And I know that there's people out there that don't get it and that they're all about the inches, but you know, we'll just keep pounding that drum over here that we're more about the memories and the experience. And
Yep.
do I want to shoot a big buck? 100%. But right now in my life, and you're not in the same, obviously the same stage of your life, but there's just not time right now. I mean, if I can, me punching that tag, I am so focused and thinking about deer hunting this time of year that it's a problem, and it causes problems at home. It causes problems. It doesn't cause problems. It doesn't cause problems at work because you got to go and do your job. But it's like when it comes to, you know, the evenings and the weekends, it's like, I just want to be in the woods. And now that the tag's punched, it's like, yeah, like I want to be the best dad ever. I just want to hang out here and be around. And I got to spend Halloween with Sarah and the kids, and it was awesome. So, and I had no regrets and no thinking about anything else. So,
yeah. Well, you know, and it's funny. It makes me think back. There was a 10-pointer I shot, I don't know, years ago. You guys were little. You might have been. I mean, you were little, like 5, 6 or something. And I was hunting the farm in Lima, and the night before, my buddy Rick was in this one stand, and a great big 10-point came in, and he shot high and nicked right across its back, and that deer ended up heading off to the west and out across his farm fields, and I figured it'd be coming back in the morning. So I went up there and got in a tree stand that I had. They were all permanents back then. We didn't have portables, and I had this little permanent up in a tree, and right where kind of a pinch point where this woods came together was a little narrow spot, and that buck liked to pass through there. And so I got in that stand and waited, and sure enough, it was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. I see that buck coming through the woods, and so I get ready, and there was some big oak trees in there, and he goes behind this oak tree. I'm going to draw right when he goes behind the oak tree. So I'm positioned. I come to full draw. We didn't have a lot of breakdown back then. I was shooting an old Jennings split T, and it was pulling 72 pounds and probably let off to 60. You know what I mean? So I remember being at full draw, and I'm waiting for him to step out, and he didn't step out and didn't step out. And I'm like, where the hell did he go? And so while I'm at full draw, I start looking around, and I happened to look down, or I heard something, and he was like 5 yards away, right underneath me, like looking at me, and I'm at full draw, and he's kind of looking up. And so I'm just holding. And then I start to shake, you know, and then your arms are trembling. I'm like, I don't have a choice. I have to let down. I got to let down. So I start trying to let down easy, you know, and he spins and takes off running. And then he hooks to the left, and he's making like a big semicircle around me. And I see an opening in the brush that he's in up ahead. So I come back to full draw, and he's at a dead run running away. And I pull back, and I'm waiting with my 30-yard pin. I'm like, I'll aim high. When I'm on his nose, I'm going to let it go.
Oh my God.
And I shot, and that deer hooked to the right and took off running. That was the last I ever saw, you know. And so we didn't have radios or anything. So I stayed there. And then your Uncle Mike came still hunting over like at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And so I told him what happened. I said, I think I missed that buck. He was over in that brush by them logs. And so he goes, well, stay here. Let me walk over to where you direct me to where you shot, and I'll take a look. And so he went over there, and I gave him the signal where to go. You know, I was waving him which direction to go. And then he looks back at me, and he puts his hands up in the air, and he goes, dead deer.
What?
Like,
no way.
I'm like, what? And I had hit that deer right through the neck, right about where you hit yours, and I cut his jugular, and there was just blood everywhere.
Huh.
And that deer didn't go 40 yards into that brush and drop dead. And I was so excited that we had the deer there, and I told my brother, I go, wait here, I'll be back. And I hiked out to the road, hopped in the truck, and drove home and got you boys and brought you out there so you could be a part of it. You remember that? I
remember exactly where that was too. It was right on the south side of Lima Country Club.
Yeah. And I had I got that deer mounted, and I had a plaque that had a spot for a picture, and I put a picture of you and Jimmy kneeling next to it. So,
Can
but that
you
was the only neck shot I ever had with archery.
can you take a picture of that picture for me and send it to me?
Yeah, yeah,
I'll put it up with this because that
yeah.
I was thinking about that. I wanted because with this past weekend, you had me shoot a buck, and I had Billy. So I got a picture with Billy with the deer.
Yep, I saw
Jimmy
that.
shot his. Got a great picture with Jay.
Yep.
And then I mean it all comes back around to that, and it's the same thing that Jim DiAgostino was talking about. Him and Jimmy both had their boys about the same time,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
it just adds a whole other dynamic to it. It's
Yeah.
you just
And when I
feel
think back, there was no, I'm lucky you boys were home. I could have gone back there, and your mother might have taken you and gone shopping or
right,
something.
right. Yeah, there's no cell phones back then or
No,
anything.
no. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'll take a picture of that and send it to you. I still look at that. It's out in the garage. That mounts out in the garage, and I love looking at that picture and seeing you guys were little. You were little, and I had you. You guys were just tickled to death to be in the deer woods and kneeling over that 10 point.
Yeah, and it's amazing seeing how much. I mean, Billy last year when I had that truck full of deer when I had that big weekend at Howlett's. He wasn't quite sure what to make of all the dead deer. Like he thought it was cool, but then he was kind of uncomfortable. Yeah. But I mean, I was out here, had the deer hanging in the garage just for a couple days, and he wanted to keep going out and seeing it, and he was spinning it around, slapping it and stuff. And we're gonna chop it up and eat it. I'm like, yeah, Bill, we're gonna chop it up and eat it. So it's really fun as they start to understand what's going on. And I guess before we get into your story, I just want to go back to something you just said about how you guys handled tracking your deer.
Yeah,
that one you just told the story on. It is so important to do that. If you have another person with you, to have them go stand where you saw the deer and where you saw the deer run, because I know Connor lost another one that he hit on Sunday night.
Oh, okay.
He lost another buck, and he lost they had blood, and then they ended up running out of the blood. But one of the things that was missing was the arrow. They never found the arrow.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that, who knows? I mean, that deer could have pulled the arrow. That arrow could have flown out in the goldenrod, and you'd almost never find it without a luminoc. Right. A million things could have happened. But one of the most important things when you shoot a deer, whether it's a good hit or not, if you didn't see where that deer died, is have somebody or yourself, if you're by yourself, just mentally mark that tree where that deer was standing when you shot at it, so you have a place to start. It's so hard this time of year with no snow and red leaves all over the ground just to figure out where to get started. It's a nightmare.
It's I don't know about you. I mean, some people like Uncle Mike he'll get out of the tree and walk to exactly where the deer was standing or where he last saw it. And and Jimmy's the same way. And there's something about, I get out of the tree and then I'm like, well, I think it was over here. I have trouble getting to the exact spot. But boy, if you have somebody that can walk over there and then you give them hand signals, like right there, that's right where I shot, or right where I last saw it, and then it went off to the right from there. And that's a great tip. I mean, it really does help a lot.
Yeah.
So it was funny that one I got, it was, it's been a heck of a year with this, was COVID. I was going to buy a new bow, and then it got too late, and I'm like, all right, I'll get a string, and I think I need some arrows. I know my bow needs a string, and then I'll start shooting a little. I never started shooting. So then it gets where season's going to open. So I set up in the basement here, and I was taking a couple shots, but I can only shoot 10 yards, but I was shooting great. And then I'm looking at my inventory stuff. I'm put together like seven good arrows that were the same spline and everything. So I'm like, all right, these will work. So, and then I'm like, but I've been shooting a Rage, and I really like that. I don't know if it's called a hypodermic or whatever it is, but it's a Rage mechanical broadhead, and they just fly beautiful for me. So I went on Amazon. I ordered, I think, 6 Rages. That's all I bought for gear. I got those. And I was going to buy camouflage. I was going to get all this, or, good clothes from First Light or something. Nothing. I didn't have no time. And so I started, with my hunting, I was very reluctant I'm like, I got to get out there. I really wanted a bow kill, but I was very reluctant. I want to be proficient with a weapon. I don't want things not to go well. Last year, I I didn't get to hunt hardly at all because of what went on with Grandpa Gaffney. And then I had, but I had a doe come by. It was a nice doe, and I thought I had a beautiful shot on her, but I must have just nicked her high. And so I ended up not getting her, and we tracked her, took better part of a half a day, and before we ran out of blood and lost her. And the year before, I think the year before I got a buck that was not pretty. Matter of fact, it was out of the same stand I was sitting in Saturday. And that was just not good. I didn't know I could reload a bow so fast. I shot that deer, and I could tell I hit far back. It was like a gut shot or something. And the deer ran down the food plot and made a hook. And I don't even remember doing it, but I immediately grabbed out another arrow, knocked it, drew back, and as the deer went running back up through the middle of the food plot, I had ranged it. I knew it was 22 yards. So the deer's running up through the middle of the food plot, and I shot, and I got it through the back legs. And it was just, but I put it down, and I ended up, long story short, I went back the next morning and ended up finding it. But, the coyotes had got into it. It was just, and it's like I'd had several really good clean kills prior to that, and I just kind of losing confidence. It's like a golf game, right? And so much of it's mental, So
well, with you, it's been these last I'm going to say almost 10 years with you. You have not caught a break between work and family responsibilities,
family stuff, and with my father and now with Grandpa.
You just haven't caught a break. I mean, you haven't been able to get real serious about archery hunting and. So I'm going to say almost 10 years. It's been.
Yeah. And luckily I would go out, and like the first day of the hunt, we took a week off. The first time I've ever taken a week off to hunt. I took a week off for a rutcation with you boys there probably 4 or 5 years ago. And very first afternoon, I shot that 8-point, and that was that. So,
yeah.
But, so I really, really wanted a good, clean kill. And I was hell bent that I wasn't going to shoot at we got some really nice bucks on running the property. And I honestly was not going to shoot, especially at Frank and Beans, not even going to shoot at him, because I knew I'd be getting all worked up. And if I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I wounded that deer and we lost him, and I would have taken a doe. I just wanted to get a deer down. And so Saturday we're all there, and then everybody leaves, and I'm the only one at camp. So I'm like, well, I hung out around there, did some chores, worked on the 4-wheeler. Then I'm like, I had a target. I brought my target with me. I had it in the back of the truck. I go, I'm just going to spend some time shooting, So I set it out there 20 yards and shot, 16 or 20 times. I had 4 practice arrows. I just kept shooting, and I was shooting beautiful. I was shooting really good at 20 yards. So I felt good about it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to head out. So I'm like, where do I go? I hadn't seen a deer all day. That morning, we didn't see anything. I don't know why. I thought it would have been a beautiful morning, but I did some scouting and checked some cams, and I did not have a trail cam in the bull meadow. I always have one there, but the bull meadow was tore up worse or better, I guess I would say, than I've seen it in years. It was like scrapes all around it. The ground was tore up where like bucks were fighting. There was stuff going on there. So I'm like, and I hadn't hunted it all year. Nobody had. So I'm like, I'm going to go sit in that ladder stand in the bull meadow and see what happens. So I went over there, and I did buy a new grunt call this year. I've hit my grunt call was probably 25 years old, and it was, still made noise, but boy, it wasn't as nice as this new one. So I bought a Primos grunt call. So, and I had my doe bleat, that little can call. I love that thing. So every 25 minutes or 30 minutes, I'd put out a series of grunts and a little doe bleat, and it was about a little after 5. I think it was 5 after 5 or 10 after 5, and I look at the top side of the bull meadow, and of course the whole bull meadow to the far side is maybe 40 yards. Mm-hmm. And there's a buck just staring out of the brush. There's all the rose bushes and briars and old dead pine trees in there, and he's just standing there looking right at me, but he's not seeing me. And then he starts to walk out, and so I reach over and I get my bow, and then I'm looking at him. I'm like, do I want this deer or not? And he's coming, and I recognize him. We got pictures. He's the 6-point. Mm-hmm. I know he's a year and a half, but he's a decent buck. He's got 3 to his side. I'm like, he ain't bad, it's a nice looking body. I go, I think I'll. So he comes right at me, and then he stops about 20 yards facing me, and then he turns and starts to go. There's a little bit of I made this food plot, and I got like a little finger that comes off to the north on a ridge there, and there's an apple tree right on the point. And he starts walking towards that apple tree, and it's gotten overgrown over the years. And so I had gotten the bow, I had clipped on, and then I was shifting, turning around to my right, getting my foot placement right. And then I thought to myself, when he goes behind that apple tree, there's a trail that goes right down that little ridge, that finger to the north. And I'm like, he's going to step right out on that. So I'm like, I'm going to draw when he gets behind the apple tree. So he goes behind the apple tree as he's walking behind it. He was on the move too. And so I come to full draw. I wasn't aimed or anything. I just came to full draw, and I was holding like off to the side watching the deer. And he stops and he stands like a statue, just looking down like he's looking for what was going on or where that grunting was or whatever. He's just standing there looking. And then I'm looking at his kill zone, and there's all these treetops and branches and stuff, but there's just like a hole. There's just a clear path right in the kill zone. Everything else is covered. And I'm like, there's an opening right there. So I bring the bow up, get on my peep, put my 20-yard pin on him, and right behind the front shoulder, and everything just felt perfect. And I touched it off, and that arrow hit him. And just the sound of that hit, I was like, it was funny because like within a fraction of a second, I went from yes, good hit to shit, I shoulder shot him, and because he spun and he took like two bounds, and I see the arrow go flying through the air and land on the ground right by the 4-wheeler trail that comes up. And so I see that fly out, and he's on a death run. I know that run. And he goes, hooks around and jumps back into the brush right where he came out. And so I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened, And then I'm like, geez, did I not get him good? And so I was like, well, what do I do now? It's like 5:10. I think my brother was coming back up. I think Uncle Mike was going to be back up there hunting. And so I'm like, well, I'll call Uncle Mike, see if he's around. So I call for Mike, no answer. So I figure, well, he's out of cell service. He must have gone way back in or something. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I better get down because I don't want to be looking in the dark. Let me get down and see what the arrow looks like. So I pack up, get down, walk over to the spot where he was standing. I see the ground kicked up where he spun and ran. I'm like, all right, this is where I hit him. And then I turn and I start walking. I'm like, that arrow ought to be right over here. And so I walk over, and there's the arrow. And so I pick up the arrow and I look at it, and like the 12, 14 inches of the arrow is just almost like coagulated blood on, just like covered with blood. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah. I that was not a shoulder hit, because he wouldn't have dumped it that fast and left that kind of evidence on the arrow. And so I took the arrow and kind of flicked the blood and stuff off, and I went to put it back in my quiver. I'm like, I better stick it here. This is where I found it. I'll stick it here. And it flew uphill from the deer. So I'm like, he ought to be like a yard or two downhill ought to be his path. So I start looking there, and then in the grass, I see some blood. I'm like, well, wow, that's a good sign. So I start following that, and it was actually pretty easy to follow it. And as I traversed that 20 yards or 25 yards over to where he jumped back in the brush, it's more and more. And then he dove past it. There's a dead pine tree there that's like 6-7 feet tall. And he ran past that. And I look at that, and the whole side of it's just sprayed with blood and everything. I'm like, oh boy, yeah, this could be a dead deer, So then I just creeped into that thicket, and I'm looking down into the rose bushes there. And, I'm like, God, I think that's him laying right there. So I just followed the blood trail down, and sure enough, he was in there probably 30 yards. And deader than a doornail. I've never had a deer with like so much blood, bubbly, like frothy blood out its mouth.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I took a picture of it, but it was like, we have them bleed and they'll have some blood on them, but this was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I guess looking back, I'm not surprised that he was dead there. I never heard him crash. And where he went into, there's a little bit of a draw, and then it comes up the other side. And I immediately hung my bow up and grabbed my binoculars and was watching the other side to see if he ran up out, and I never saw him come out. So so I'm down there, and I'm like, yes, I got one. I couldn't believe it. And that deer was dead in seconds. And
yeah, you made
I thought back to that. There used to be an ad when they first came out, when Rage first came out, they had an ad. There was an archer. I don't know if he's still around, but he used to be like a, spokesperson, and he had TV shows and whatnot, but it was at Chuck Adams.
Yeah.
And he had an ad, and he used to say the motto was like, the rage. It's like throwing an axe through a deer, And it's
yeah.
like, let me tell you something. You should have seen the hole in the side of that deer.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I ended up cutting through. I hit probably a little higher than I would have liked. I would have been closer to the heart, would have been better, but I took the top of both lungs, and I think I took the main artery that runs along the spine. And
Okay.
yeah, it was just really good. You talk efficacy with that broadhead and the bow and the shot, and it was exactly 20 yards. I know it's 18 yards to the edge of that apple tree and the far side. So he was like exactly at 20 yards, and I just came from shooting, multiple reps at 20 yards, and everything felt so good. And
Yeah.
not a great big buck, but he ended up weighing 120 pounds, and a nice year and a half buck, and
Yeah.
for the limited time I have to hunt, and my old 20-year-old bow and stuff I scrapped together. But boy, it was great. I couldn't be happier. I mean, it's always, like you said, everybody wants to shoot a big one, and I could have passed, but Mike and I last year, we both, I think he got one or two and I got the one, just because everything that was going on with the family. I only hunted a couple times in gun season. I hunted opening weekend and killed that buck. And then I hunted that Sunday and fell 400 feet down the side of the hill. And so I didn't, my season was pretty screwed up last year, but felt really good to connect. And Mike and I had vowed that this year we're not going to be as picky. We're going to put some meat in the freezer because that's what we really wanted. And he's off this week, and I talk to him every day to see how he's doing. And so far he passed on a 6-point, a 5-point. He's had him right there. I go, I thought we weren't passing. He's like, well, I got the whole week. He goes, I'm going to.
Yeah, now it's Friday. And
he goes, now it's going to come to Friday, and I'm going to have nothing, and I'm going to wish I hadn't passed.
And it's going to be 70 degrees this weekend.
Yeah, so.
But you know what? Uncle Mike says that, and he just loves being in the tree, and I'm so happy that he's able to get up there and do that this week. I don't think he's ever done this. He's always wanted to take a week off for archery, and he's never done it. So
he told me, he goes, I was bummed that none of you guys were taking this week off.
Yeah.
He goes, it ends up, I've had an absolutely amazing time. It's very peaceful. I do what I want. I don't have to worry about bumping into anybody.
Yeah.
And he goes, now get a load of this. That night, at the same time I shot that deer, Mike had that split brown 9 right underneath him. And I don't know if I told you that or not, but
in the brush or
in the brush, and we put that ladder stand in that brush where you usually hunt.
Yeah.
And when you're in your stand and I'm in the bull meadow, if you're grunting or if you shoot or something, I can hear you. And so I told Mike, I go, were you in that stand all night? He's like, yeah, I forgot my phone, because I pulled the deer up out of the briars, and I got him up on the old logging road by the edge of the bull meadow, and I dressed him out, and there was coyotes right below me. They're all howling and yipping. And so I left my coat and my gear and stuff there next to the deer. And I walked back and got a 4-wheeler, and I went down to the garage and got the trailer.
Yeah.
And went up to pick up my deer, because I'm like, it's going to be a pain in the butt to try and pick that up myself, put it on the back of the 4-wheeler. And then I'm driving back up through the lower logging road, and there's Mike standing in the road. It's dark by now, so Mike's there. And I go, where were you? He goes, I was in the ladder stand in the brush here, I'm like, did you hear me grunting? He's like, I never heard any grunting. And I was grunting loud.
Yeah.
I'm like, did you hear me shoot? No, didn't hear any shooting. I go, did you hear all the coyotes that were right below me? I haven't heard any coyotes tonight. So
yeah, like Jimmy shared the story. I think it was on the podcast he did today. He shared the story about how, he had shot that one time he had shot the buck, and it was kind of a rodeo when he spined it, and he shot all of his arrows like that. He was hunting in the bull meadow, and you're in your stand where you shot your buck. Yeah. And I was in my stand in the brush, and I heard him shoot and him hit the deer, and that deer made the most like wild guttural like moan when he hit it.
Really?
So Jimmy, I didn't know what happened, and Jimmy's like just texted me, just get over here. And this was a long time ago. This is like back like Motorola Razr flip phones, Yeah. And so I'm like still hunting over there. Took me like a half an hour to get there, and I get there, and he's like out of arrows, and he's like, what have you been doing? I'm like, I'm still hunting. He's like, I got a deer over here that needs to be finished off,
Yeah, well, that was Hooker. He ended up
getting Hooker.
We called Hooker.
Yeah, his tying his beams hooked up at the end. Yeah, and that was.
I was talking to Adam tonight, and he put a climber right on the main logging road above my bull meadow, right above it there, and he said when he gets up in the tree, he can watch the bull meadow. He can watch the small meadow below it and see everything. And he missed a heck of a buck tonight.
Oh no.
Yeah. It came across the little meadow out of that brush by where Mike's ladder stand is.
Mm-hmm.
And it went across that little meadow. There's a scrape down there. Checked that, came up through the brush into the bull meadow, checked the scrape in front of my ladder stand. This was like at 10 to 5 or so. And then it went across the bull meadow, checked the other scrape, and then went onto the ridge, bumped a doe. The doe took off, and he ended up marching right up to the road and then turned right and walked right down to Adam. And he was exactly at 30 yards. And Adam said, I don't know what went wrong. He said, I shot right under him.
Oh.
Right underneath him, and he just turned and walked away. But he said it was a really good heavy beam buck, so. But yeah, that's what I don't have, right? The way things, especially with this COVID and the way things are at work, I can't get away. I got weekends, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
yep.
Having one on the ground takes a little pressure off me, And I know it's like a lot of guys, hunt for that big buck. But I remember when my father was my age, he was like 60 years old, and he was hell-bent he wanted to kill a big buck. That's back when I was killing all the big bucks. And I said, Dad, just go hunting.
Yeah.
If you see a buck and you want to shoot him, shoot. Don't hold out, because life's too short. I mean, how many years we got left? And, and it's, I don't know, at my age, I've got, 6 or 8, bucks that are in the books, and that's the guys have always busted my chops, because I shoot the biggest ones and the littlest ones,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
we love you for it. Yeah,
so.
That's the thing. You're opportunistic, and I think that's there needs to be more of that. I think it's good to let them go. It's good to let the little spikers go and let them turn into good yearlings or 2.5-year-olds. Like it makes the hunt more fun for everybody. But you got to do what you want. At the end of the day, you buy your license. If you have a deer walk in front of you and you want to shoot it, there's nobody that should be judged for that.
Yeah.
If it's on property that you're trying to manage and you're trying to do a certain thing, and then that's a different discussion. But
right.
If you're out hunting your land or you're hunting public land and you want to fill your freezer, or that, I think my buck was just a 1.5-year old. He was just a really good 1.5-year old.
Yeah.
But it never ever crossed my mind. It was the second I saw him, release was in my hand, bow was in my hand, and I'm trying to figure out how far he's going to be. Like it never crossed my mind. And that's a pretty good feeling. Like when you're just locked in and you're ready to go. I think, I was talking to one of the guys out here, John Peterson. He wanted to hear the story. He had called me earlier in the week and we were chatting. I was telling him, and he was really happy for me because, he's several years ahead of me. He's got 3 boys. He's got 3 kids, 3 boys. And, his time's limited. It has been limited for the last 6-8 years. And, it's really, unless you've been in that position, you don't understand the time grab you have. And then to go to public land and challenge yourself in an area that you don't really know, it's not managed or controlled, and you go in there and you put a game plan together and you make it happen. That's the trophy. The experience, The experience is the trophy, not the size of the buck, the inches. Now one of these days, I'm gonna shoot a stud out of there. There are some giant bucks.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah. I got 2 sheds and a deadhead from there last year that were all 130-inch bucks. Like there's good deer in there.
Yeah. And you got pictures of them. So
yeah. So I'm maybe not 130. I know the deadhead I have sitting on the table right here, I should put tape to him, but I bet you he's 125-inch.
Oh, at least.
And then I got that one shed that was super heavy that I found in January.
Yep.
That one's, that's got to be, with all the mass and everything, that's got to be 125, 130-inch buck. And then that other one I found, he's got to be 100, same thing, 125-inch. But there's big bucks in there, no doubt.
My philosophies with archery hunting has always been that you have limited opportunities that are going to be given to you or that you manufacture, however you want to look at it. Luck and the grace of God plays into it, right?
Yeah.
But when you have a buck that walks out and stands perfectly broadside at 20 yards, you know what I mean? And everything's there. You can let him go, but how many more of those are you going to get? I didn't start hunting until the 17th of October. And so I got a month to do it. And I only got, I got a couple weekends left, But the point is that, like, I might have 2 more opportunities. And like this week, Mike's hunting all week, and he's had 3 opportunities. That split brown 9, he didn't think he was going to turn and come straight to him, so he didn't draw yet. And then once he started coming in, he couldn't draw.
Yeah.
So, and the deer literally was standing underneath his tree and walked away, and he never got on him and got a shot. But
that's a rookie mistake. He's just not,
yeah, I'll let you tell him that.
No, I wouldn't do that. Not in a minute.
That's right.
No, it's good stuff, and I'm proud of what you, Jimmy, and I have done so far, and excited to see what the rest of the season brings, because now the pressure's off and we can all kind of hunker down and focus in on the big stuff.
I will wait for a bigger one.
Yeah.
I will shoot something bigger than this.
Frank and Beans will not walk by you with a gun.
No. Sure. And we were looking at, Mike ended up, when I got back there, we had the buck hanging, and I told Mike, he's not huge, but he's a nice 1.5 year buck. And he goes, you know what that is right there? I go, what's that? He goes, that's a $5,000 buck. Because he goes, that's what you spend to own this place, and every year in taxes.
Yeah.
So he goes, for the money you spend, you shoot whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, exactly. You could buy it. You could get a 160-inch buck in Iowa for $5,000, but
yeah, exactly.
That's all right.
All right, I should let you run.
Yeah. Well, before we finish, I gotta give some clarification to something. So we didn't get there at the end of my story. I forgot to mention it, but I posted in my Instagram story about a note that somebody left for me on my truck.
Oh yeah.
So I was, I'm all excited. I shot a buck on public, and I'm proud of myself. So I get down to the truck, and Connor's with me, and we're going to drive up the road, because where I dragged the deer down was a ways down the road. So I dragged him out and walked back to my truck. And so I pick up Connor, and I'm like, hey, there's a note under my windshield wiper. Can you grab that for me while you're out of the truck? And he's like, yeah. So he grabs it, and he comes in the truck, and he's like reading it. And it's, I don't remember what it said word for word, but it was like, hey, are you Billy from Pertnear Outdoors? I can't believe that, or if this is you, I really enjoy what you guys do. I love your content, and you're an inspiration to me, and you've helped me out so much. And, oh, by the way, why is Big Jim beating you out this season? He's making you look bad. So I'm like, this is hilarious. So like, somebody literally found my truck and left me a note. I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I get back to camp, and Jimbo's, I was on cloud 9. I'm all excited. I get back there, and you guys are all there, and I crack a beer, and I'm telling the story, and I'm all giddy, and I'm like, oh, and somebody left me a note on my truck. And Jimmy's like, oh, really? He's like videotaping me. And you guys let that go all night. And then this is like our camp thing. Like, everybody wakes up. We wake up like an hour and a half before we have to go out in the woods, and everybody just sits at the dinner table, frustrated, and like, not frustrated, but struggling to wake up and tired, and
having our coffee.
Uncle Mike's ornery, and he's drinking Mountain Dew, and it's like
he's having Mountain Dew and donuts, breakfast of champions.
So Jimmy shows up, and he comes in, and he's like, man, he goes, you want to know what sucks, Bill? I'm like, what? He's like, it's cool that somebody left you a note, but he's like, it sucks that now they know where you hunt, and you're talking about the success you're having. So like, now your spot's blown. I'm like, shit. I'm like, I never thought of that. And I'm like, man, I'm going to have to like take the stickers off my truck. I'm going to have to like hide, park down the road, hide my vehicle, this and that. And I don't remember what happened, but he made a smirk, or one of you guys kind of giggled or something.
Oh, he let it out. Yeah.
And I'm like, that was you, wasn't it? Yeah.
He had you. He should have let that continue to play.
He's like, when somebody signs sincerely Richard, you didn't realize it was me, because we call each other Richard, Dick.
Yeah.
But, oh God. So
I'll tell you a funny story.
What?
So you guys all leave, and then Sunday I'm packing up to leave, and that storm was blowing in, and I'm out there, and the leaves are blowing around, and I see something. I'm loading my truck, and I see something out there, like in the lawn there, blowing around the leaves. I'm like, what the hell is that? Somebody drops them. I go over and I pick it up, and I'm reading it, and there's this note, and it's like, are you Billy Harvey?
Okay, so that's where the note is.
So I have that note in my truck.
Okay. We'll leave it at the cabin. We'll put it up there.
Yeah, I'm gonna post it up at the cabin.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'll put it with the horns when I get the Euro done. I'll put it
there
up
you
with
go.
it. It'll be a memory. So
That's right.
it's good stuff, Dad.
I know.
Congratulations to you.
It's a family tradition.
Family tradition, man.
That's right.
I can't wait for a couple of weeks from now we can get out there with the rifles and start stacking them up again. So
That's right.
all right,
Well,
have a good night.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be able to be on Breedinum Radio. Have a story to share.
It's been a long journey, but you finally made it.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
All right. See ya.
See ya. Feeding them.
Fading them.